Giant playoff win against the Vikings. Rodney had a big game, and now he's back healthy and really a part of that Giants offense. So, guys, while 12 teams prep for the playoffs, the other 60% of the league starts the master plan for '98. Quick work in Indy. Complete house cleaning for the Colts. At 3-13, worst record in the league. They take the Indy out of Lindy. They fire head coach Lindy Infante and director of football operations Bill Tobin today, then hire Carolina's Bill Polian to be the new team president. The Colts beat the Super Bowl champion Packers. They beat the Dolphins 41-0 just 8 days ago, but it was all too late to save the Colts coach.
It's like I've told the players from day one, if you give everything that you've got, you don't have to look yourself in the mirror and say, wow, you know, I really messed that thing up. I mean, all of us here have worked as hard as we possibly can. We've given ourselves to the organization 100%. And when you do that in life in general, you can walk away proud.
Winning feeds off of itself. Unfortunately, losing does too. And we were looking for ways to foul up.
And Bill Tobin, clean out your office early because somebody's coming in. Hired within a couple of hours after this scene was Bill Polian.
I don't think we're gonna have success overnight. I wouldn't predict that. I wouldn't lead anybody to believe that. We'll implement the new program and get ready to go, and I think we'll improve, but it'll take a little time.
Well, Mort, they moved very quickly to get Bill Polian in. Does that mean a hiring of a new coach will happen just as quickly?
Well, I think that's going to happen pretty quickly, and I know Jim Irsay and Bill Polian pretty well, and philosophically, they are very much alike. They are they're not going to build a team for the Dome. Let's just put it that way. Jack Edwards had something on the Monday Evening Quarterback about Dome team success since 1987, 167 in the playoffs, 0-5 in conference games. They are going to build a team like Bill Polian wanted to in Carolina, to run the football, to win in December and January, to stop the run, special teams. That brings up these names without question. George Seifert, Nick Saban of Michigan State, I think are the leading candidates here, but don't rule out Bill Belichick, the Jets defensive coordinator. You can hurt Bill Parcells' team a little bit. Emmett Thomas of the Philadelphia Eagles. You got Gunther Cunningham of the Kansas City Chiefs. Wade Phillips off Buffalo, off Marv Levy's staff. And speaking of Marv Levy, you know, Bill Polian was not afraid to hire Marv Levy in his 60s, when he was in the age of 60s. I think Fritz Sherman of the Green Bay Packers can't be ruled out because even if he is in his mid-60s, he's got great credentials. And finally, the two coordinators off the Carolina staff, Joe Pendry, the offensive coordinator who Bill likes, and Vic Fangio, the defensive coordinator. Sterling, either way, I know this team is going to be built to win outdoors in the playoffs and not indoors for the RCA Dome.
Well, that's Polian's blueprint, Mort. You're exactly right. But I want to get back to my old coach, Lindy Infante. I thought he was a very good head coach, but he is a great offensive coordinator. As a head coach, a record of 36-61. As an offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, 41-22. I think as a head coach, Lindy takes on the responsibilities of every position player, and all the responsibilities of a head coach, and I think it's too much for him to handle instead of delegating some of those responsibilities. When he has an opportunity to hone in and game plan people for the offense only, I think he does. He's one of the best coaches in the NFL in doing that. I had to put Mike Holmgren and Sherm Lewis up there, of course, because I played for him. Good head coach, great offensive coordinator, so I wouldn't be shocked to see him on somebody's sideline calling plays for an offense.
Whoever gets to run this offense, you inherit Marshall Faulk, Sean Dawkins, Marvin Harrison, Ken Dilger, some young offensive linemen, and the first overall pick.
Got to get a quarterback.
What do? Take Manning or leave. It's the 6th time in the last 8 years that an AFC East team has earned the #1 overall pick in the draft. Lots more ahead on our final regular season show. Dan Deerdorf looks at tonight's game and the postseason. Chris Berman recalls other significant Monday night regular season finales. Instant Replay takes us to the two men who were Miami quarterbacks after Greasy and before Marino. There was Woodstrach.
I know that Strock felt that he should have been the starter. Woodby felt that he should have been playing the whole ball game. But, you know, when you point to the scoreboard and say that, well, we're in the Super Bowl, things have worked out pretty well.
We'll look ahead to the playoffs, including the Steelers' chances. You know, they're led by emotional leader Bill Cowher.
Jamie, you got 1 catch and 1 run. That's the most productive day in your entire career. No, great job.
And we know Dancing Barry put the Jets out of the playoffs and made history. But we have another big milestone that he achieved yesterday that you may not know about, but will when you come back.
Monday is brought to you by Zales, the Diamond and Holiday Gift Store, by Coca-Cola Classic. Get in on the action. Play Coca-Cola NFL Red Zone. And by Chrysler, engineered to be great cars.
After the anticlimax that was the 2-yard carry to put Barry Sanders at the milestone mark of 2,000 yesterday, he made history with his next carry.
50, 40, 30, look out!
This 53-yard rushing attempt giving Barry a total of 2,358 yards from scrimmage. That breaks the single-season record previously held by Marcus Allen in 1985. The other top yard gainers in a single season include Eric Dickerson, O.J. Simpson, and James Wilder. Jets starting quarterback Neil O'Donnell owns the lowest career interception rate in NFL history. He's thrown just 53 INTs in 2,519 attempts. Just one interception every 47.5 times he throws the ball. So maybe it's a bit ironic that the two crucial plays from the Jets' perspective in their loss to the Lions were interceptions not thrown by O'Donnell, but one by Ray Lucas and one by Leon Johnson. And both ended Jets scoring hopes and playoff hopes as well. Darrell Green's touchdown on an 83-yard interception run back yesterday set an NFL record. Green becomes the oldest player in league history to score on an INT return. Darrell Green yesterday was 37 years, 10 months, and 6 days. That's 10 months and a day younger than Lionel Washington, who set the record back on October 26th.
Inside the Numbers is brought to you by Visa, the official card of the NFL. It's everywhere you want to be. www.visa.com.
Coming up next, the surprise players of this year, and who's the Tampa Bay of next year? We're going to take a peek back at '97, look ahead to the playoffs, and ahead to next season when you come back.
Hey, don't worry about it. How'd you know? I just, come on, put it on, all right? You knew my size and everything. And it looks good, thank you. Feels good. Thanks. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, man. Cool.
This from '97. Steve Young wins his 6th passing title. Barry Sanders, of course, the second best rushing season ever. Tim Brown caught 14 yesterday to tie Herman Moore at 104. Rob Moore, the receiving yardage king. John Randall led the NFL in sacks. Ryan McNeil, not a Pro Bowl selection, but led the league in picks. Mike Hollis, who's going to the Pro Bowl, scored the most points. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar already has the touchdown title, so anything he gets tonight is gravy. And let's now talk more about the '97 season and look ahead a little bit to the playoffs with Mike Wilbon from the Washington Post and Mitch Albom from the Detroit Free Press. Guys, as we wrap up the year, let's look at some of the highs and lows in the football year. And let's start with the game of the year. There were so many great games for different reasons, different weeks. If you had to pick one, Mike, what's the game of the year?
Week 1. 49ers against Tampa Bay. And I think so because the Niners lost in such a way, not only losing the game, but of course Jerry Rice and Steve Young, they were on red alert from day one. I don't think there's any way they win 13 games this year if they don't lose that game and have to get priorities in order very quickly, and Tampa Bay found the confidence it needed to become a playoff team.
I like Green Bay against Dallas. You know, if Super Bowl teams came out and did an encore, that would have been the Dallas game. It was left over from last year's Super Bowl, the one thing that Green Bay didn't get done. That, to me, crumbled the Dallas dynasty. They no longer had the swagger, and it solidified Green Bay. They haven't lost since.
And there are a couple others. You'd think of Kansas City right away in a couple occasions. Against Oakland, against Denver, the miraculous field goal. Yesterday's Lions-Jets game, which you'll talk more about later, certainly among them. What about surprise players? Guys who were around in September but are really forefront of our minds here in December?
I have to say Cordell Stewart. I mean, I knew he was good. I didn't know he was this good. It astounds me to think that Cordell Stewart, not all that long ago, was 3rd on the depth chart behind Neil O'Donnell and Jim Miller. Can't believe it.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of personnel people were wondering in the preseason if Cordell could do this, so I agree with you, Mitch. But talking about far down on the depth chart, how about Boomer Esiason, who 7 weeks ago was about 3rd on the depth chart and wound up winning like 4 of the last 5 and getting Cincinnati back on track to the point where he may not retire and be on television now. He may have to play another season or two.
Look at the quarterbacks who played well at the end of the year. Boomer Esiason, Warren Moon had a good early part of the season. Randall Cunningham gets the Vikings in the playoffs. It's kind of back to the old days.
Retro.
That's right. Well, you know, Tampa Bay really didn't come out of nowhere this year. People thought they were going to be good. As you look at '98 and the teams that struggled in '97, who is the Tampa Bay of next season?
Atlanta, Mike, because not only is Dan Reeves coaching and not involved in personnel, which I think obviously coaching is what he does best. Tampa Bay won 5 of its last 7 games the previous year to sort of launch itself. Atlanta, I think, won 6 of 8 to end this season. I think you're looking at a very similar situation.
Well, I might be cheating a little bit here, but to me, it's the New York Jets. I mean, let's not forget, they were 1-15 last year. They're not making the playoffs this year.
I could see next year, based on what Parcells did this year, they could go into the second round, possibly go, well, I don't want to go out on a limb, but maybe to an AFC championship game. I mean, look at what he's managed to pull off in 1 year, so they're going to make some noise next year.
And coming to the Super Bowl in San Diego will be?
Pittsburgh and Green Bay.
No fair. He said the same two I was going to say, and he went to him first.
Might as well
Pittsburgh,
agree
Green
at
Bay.
the end of the year, right?
Yeah, first time.
That's right. They'll be back for their Prime Monday Minutes a little bit later in the show. And we will be back with more Prime Monday after this, including the playbook, why Dan Marino had INT problems with the Pats secondary in their first meeting, and we'll look ahead to the playoffs, including Bill Cowher, always reminding his guys what the game's about.
We're not playing bocce ball. You ever see bocce ball? You throw the thing real high in the air. I'm just trying, you know, keep the game. You are
only on ESPN.
Circuit City has great prices on DSL.
Circuit City. Hurry into Circuit City today. You can't get a better price. We guarantee it.
Another smooth camera move has us thinking about the Steelers, who suffered 4 injuries to starters in yesterday's game. Center Dermontti Dawson strained left calf. Tight end Mark Bruner injuring his foot. Wide receiver Charles Johnson twisted his knee in the fourth quarter. Plus guard Jim Sweeney strained his knee, to be evaluated during the week. Of course, a break, they get the week off. Don't have to play for another 14 days. One of the few disappointing notes there. And another great season for Pittsburgh. The 2 seed off next week after earning the bye. Really another great season for Coach Bill Cowher. All the change in this team, and he still gets it done. His teams have double-digit victories in 5 of Cowher's 6 years as Pittsburgh head coach. Why? 1, he's a real good coach, and 2, his players respond to him as well as any coach in pro sports. More examples of that in tonight's soundtracks.
Yeah, wait till I put that neck warmer. I'm going to put it right over that damn mic. That'll ground out all those damn curse words I have coming out of my mouth. No, I'm not talking to myself.
I don't see nobody standing next to you.
You're worried about me.
Nobody was standing next to you.
I'm just trying to keep my jawbones moving. I don't want them to freeze so I can holler at your ass during the game.
I just want to make sure.
This is a 60-minute affair, one play at a time, beat off each other, and let's have some damn fun today. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Oh.
Blitz by the Bengals. Steelers pick it up, throwing for the end zone. Touchdown, Steelers!
Throw the ball. Throw the thing. Let's go. All right. We're not playing bocce ball. You ever see bocce ball? You throw the thing real high in the air.
I'm just trying, you know, keep the game.
You're driving me nuts. You're driving me nuts. Let's go. I want a hit. Good time, man. Let's go. What I'm talking about. You guys use self-restraint out there. Self-restraint. I'm holding you accountable for those 2.
Wow.
All right, man. Maybe, I don't know. I can't believe I did it. Who'd they hold? Who'd they hold? You?
I ran around and we got some neck guys.
Yeah, well, you screwed up the blitz, and now we're even.
And it is Cordell back, looking for the end zone. Touchdown!
Good job! Good job! That's where to throw the ball! That's where to throw the ball! Throw this thing, man! Is he okay?
He's going to be okay, just going to get a little rest, but he's not listening to me.
You know what? He used to be a tough guy, too, you know that?
Motion by Milne, the fullback. Back is Blake. White gets to him. Loose football. Steelers have it.
Now you're back. Now you're back.
I told him my shoulder wouldn't hurt.
Hey, Jerome needs 10 to get 100, I think. 12. Hey, Mike, if you're going to be down here advising me, at least know your damn stats.
That's pretty close, though.
That's good. Let's go, Jerome! Let's go, baby! Hey, Jerome! Let's go, man! That's the way to run! That's the way to run! Hey, Timmy, you got 1 catch and 1 run. That's the most productive day in your entire career. I know. Great job. Not bad to be a defensive coordinator on this football team.
You guys would have loved to play for him, right?
Yeah.
That's your kind of coach. Both of
No, not with Jerome Bettis. No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, you would get no catches.
Cowher Steelers and the Chiefs, they're the top 2 seeds in the AFC. And if they hold serve in 2 weeks, what a story. Cowher would meet his very good friend Marty Schottenheimer Bill was on Marty's staff for 7 years as an assistant. Let's get the thoughts here on the top 2 seeds in the AFC. Tommy, how do you think Pittsburgh will do here heading into the postseason?
I think they'll do just fine, Mike. They have great balance offensively because of Jerome Bettis. Now, the first time these two teams met this year, he only carried the ball 17 times for 103 yards. But in a must-win situation, their offensive coordinator, Chan Gailey, will give him the ball 20, 25, 30, 35 times, whatever it takes to force the defense to come up to the line of scrimmage with 8 people, 9 people. Then you get the one-on-one situations outside, allows Cordell to throw the ball freely, not have to worry so much about throwing the football.
But the Kansas City Chiefs, they have everything you would want on a team going into the playoffs. And the most important thing, they can create field position without their offense or defense being on the field. Tamarick Vanover will do that for you in the return game, just like Desmond Howard did for the Green Bay Packers last year. When you get first and goal on the 6 the first time your offense walks on the field, you have an opportunity to score a lot of points. They got great speed on defense. They got two quarterbacks that will not screw up the football game. Most importantly about Marty Ball, they have a commitment to the run with that committee, running game by committee. They're going to pound it at you until you stop it. Not to mention he's sprinkling a little West Coast offense with Andre Rison in the tight end position.
Marty said today, it's Elvis. He's starting in a couple of weeks here for the Chiefs. AFC playoffs will begin on ABC late Saturday afternoon. Jacksonville at Denver, 51 weeks after the Jaguars' stunning win at Mile High when they knocked out the #1 seed Broncos. Some notes on this game. The Jags have never played a home playoff game. Done well on the road. Broncos' only loss at Mile High over the last couple of seasons was that playoff game against Jacksonville. Tom Coughlin and company know what's ahead.
And the Broncos are a very, very good football team, and they're playing at home once again, and we have to go there. And certainly the experience from a year ago is a positive thing. I don't know that much has changed, you know, in terms of the Broncos will be favored. Everything goes, you know, by the wayside. Everyone is 0-0 at this point in time. So, you know, we just look forward to a solid week of preparation and the opportunity to go to Denver to play a very, very good Denver football team.
This is the all-time sports talk radio preview week for a game. The mental approach, how much does it linger? Look at both teams first, guys. Start with you, Star.
I like to look at the offenses of both teams. First of all, the Jacksonville Jaguars, extremely explosive. They had 2 drives in the last 2 games like this one. This was a 4-play drive over about 70 yards for the touchdown. They get it up and down the field. They're a fast break kind of team on offense. The one thing that impressed me about the Denver Broncos yesterday is, first and foremost, they got the ball to 8-4. You saw the end result. You get the ball to 8-4, you allow a lot of other things to happen. Not to mention they did this without Terrell Davis scoring 38 points. So 2 things. Stop the Jacksonville offense with that explosiveness. Make them drive down the field methodically. Get the ball to 8-4 if you're the Broncos.
Yeah, but I would caution that game yesterday. That was the San Diego Chargers, not the Jacksonville Jaguars. You know, you heard Coach Coughlin say that not much had changed in Denver, but something has changed. They are not playing the kind of defense that they played last year, especially in the area of rushing defense where they give up almost 5 yards a carry. If you cannot dictate down and distance defensively, and you get the Jacksonville Jaguars where offensively they're in 3rd and short, 2nd and short, then you're going to see the matchups on the outside that definitely favor the Jaguars.
But you look at that game yesterday, what's important, the Denver Broncos only had 1 possession in the first quarter. I mean, Denver couldn't get off the football field.
Yeah.
San Diego converted 3rd downs to 13 and 18 and 17, Mike.
Let me see. If I'm a running back, Jackson, I'm looking for 71. Baselli. I'm going to follow a lot.
You got to pick your point. I mean, unless that secondary picks it up. You want to hand the ball or you want to throw it? The secondary of the Denver Broncos got to come through big, though, to make them run.
Let's look ahead 2 weeks. We now know when the games will be played. Pittsburgh will host the early game. That is on Saturday in 2 weeks. San Francisco will host the late game on Saturday in 2 weeks. That on NBC and Fox, respectively. Same true for Sunday, when Green Bay will host the early game. This is 2 weeks from now. First Sunday of '98. Kansas City will host the late game. Well, could what happens tonight and again next week impact the future of Dan Marino in Miami and his relationship with Jimmy Johnson? A topic on Chris Mortensen's Clipboard. Coming up after this.
Will she say, I love it?
Draft order. The Colts have the first pick. And how about the Cards? They can't do it all year, then they finally win a game in the last minute, in the last week, so they lose the #1 pick. Go figure. Raiders have picked 4. 6 through 10, 6 and 7. They've been in these spots before. They're at 8 and 9. The Cowboys and the Bills. These teams met in back-to-back Super Bowls 5 and 4 years ago. Now they'll pick back-to-back. Our draft coverage begins April 18th, and I know you'll be there. Chris Mortensen, one of the names that will continue to be mentioned in the early part of that NFL draft in April, the name of Andre Wadsworth.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I think everybody's looking, obviously, at Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf, the Washington State quarterback, as the #1 pick. And that may turn out the way it be. But I'm telling you, Florida State defensive end Andre Wadsworth, as you mentioned, is a guy that some teams are saying may be as good as come out of the league in several years. In other words, it's interesting. Bill Polian's now in Indianapolis. Who do you want? You want Jim Kelly or do you want Bruce Smith? I think that's the interesting decision. Now, he does not go any farther than #3. I guarantee you that.
Wow. The future of Dan Marino. This has been talked about all year. His relationship with Jimmy Johnson, strained at times. As soon as we say it's strained, everybody says, no, it's fine. What's going on here?
Well, Jimmy really does believe Dan has played quite well this year, with the exception of the interceptions. Believe he's played far better than last year. Dan Marino, I think all he wants to hear from Jimmy Johnson is that Jimmy wants him back. I think Jimmy wants to see what happens tonight and even next Sunday in the playoffs. I think he wants to know that Dan Marino can still win a big game, and then I think they'll sit down at the end of the year and figure something out.
Hey, Mort, some of my old neighbors from New York got on the phone and said, how come you don't have instant replay? If you would have had it, the Jets would have kicked the field goal. Well, yeah, you just take a look at 2 plays that Bill Parcells was involved in. Go to the Miami game in Miami early when the pass to Wayne Corbett here. We all remember this play, ruled incomplete, and we all know that it was a catch. It doesn't guarantee that the Jets are going to win the game, but it took away an opportunity. And then, of course, yesterday on the Leon Johnson halfback pass right there, everybody has seen this play. We all know it wasn't a catch. Bill Parcells was among the 10 teams that voted against instant replay and blocked it, and he had the vote. The reason he voted against it was because he was going to be charged with losing a timeout, and that was the condition. Owners in this league do not want to hear about instant replay again. I think we're at least another year before it gets revisited. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. Neil O'Donnell, Mort, you had a quick note on him?
Yeah, real interesting. The decision on Neil O'Donnell, whether he's with the Jets or not, is going to come quickly because, as it turns out, he is due an advance of $2.75 million in February off his $4.5 million salary, and then again another $1 million in May. So that's money that they don't want to pay him if they're not going to keep him. There was an idea that you wait till June 1st to take a lesser salary cap hit, but that decision comes quick because of that advance, Mike.
A lot of veteran quarterbacks could be moving around this offseason.
I think he's gone, by the way.
Do you?
Yeah.
Mort, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
See you back up here for Countdown this weekend. Later we'll discuss Drew Bledsoe and winning the big game. And before that, what's the Pats passing game going to face from this Miami secondary? Leslie Visser comes back from Miami right after this.
The world is filled with obstacles, boundaries, and limits. Ignore them. Introducing the completely reinvented.
Touchdown passes for 30 this year, and that would lead the AFC. We're talking about Drew Bledsoe. Can he win the big game? We'll talk about that in a little bit. But more from Miami right now, and once again, here's Leslie Visser.
Well, Mike, as you and almost every football fan knows, the Dolphins secondary struggled last week against the Colts when the Colts were in motion and the Dolphins were blitzing. Well, now that Dolphins secondary faces Drew Bledsoe and a host of talented receivers. One matchup to watch will be Terrell Buckley against Terry Glenn.
Terry's a great player. Anytime a guy has big playability, you have to respect that. I mean, you could be shutting a guy out the whole game, then all of a sudden when they need it, he makes that catch. So a guy like Terry, you have to stay into the game the full 60 minutes. So I'm looking forward to it.
Glenn, the NFL's 1996 Rookie of the Year, hasn't played in 5 weeks, but says his 85% speed is still pretty impressive. The Dolphin defense, though, must show overall improvement to realize their team dream.
That's all I want for Christmas is to make the playoffs and go on from there. But, you know, Super Bowl would be the best, but I'll tell you one game at a time. I'll take this game over anything.
The Dolphin defense can't overlook the tight end position. Last week, Ken Dilger caught 3 touchdown passes against the Dolphins. Now here comes Pro Bowler Ben Coates. Well, Jimmy Johnson told me that is what he is most concerned about tonight, that Coates is physical, he pushes off against the smaller Dolphin linemen. Mike?
Thank you, red-clad colleague. We'll see you once again in a little bit. As we come back, the playbook. Why did these 2 INT returns happen in the first game? Is it Dan Marino or is it the Patriots defense throwing up a little mask, a little screen, and confusing Marino? Mark Malone is dipped into Jaws' playbook, and he'll open it up after this.
Major League Soccer.
Well, the Edge NFL matchup crew will turn the light on at NFL Films and do 2 shows for the playoffs, Saturday and Sunday. 9:30 a.m. Eastern on the Deuce. Get you ready for the Saturday games. At 9 a.m. get you ready for the Sunday encounter. Both playbooks go back to the meeting 4 weeks ago when Miami lost 27-24 at New England. Dan Marino threw for 389 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those were both taken back by New England defensive backs. In tonight's playbook, Mark's going to look at the X's and O's of how the Pats defense will try to really shut down Marino and company again. Mark?
Well, Mike, as much as Jimmy Johnson wants to run the football, you still have to game plan around Dan Marino in that passing game. I think pressure against Marino is way overrated. I think he recognizes the blitz too quickly, puts your defense at risk in man-to-man coverage. When I went back and studied the tapes of their first meeting against the Patriots, it was clear to me that the best way to defend Dan Marino in the Dolphins' passing game was with combination coverages.
First, let me show you what Dan did when New England brought an extra rusher and played straight man-to-man. From a 4-wide receiver set on 3rd and 2, Miami spreads the Patriots' defense. Dan can see pre-snap what kind of coverage he has. Safety Lawyer Malloy is cheating up before the snap to cover the back because linebacker Ted Johnson will be blitzing, making it a 5-man rush. Dan recognizes this without any problem and will go right away to the slot receiver on the other side. That's O.J. McDuffie, who will easily beat Larry Wiggum to the inside for a big play. As I said in the open, you can't count on the blitz pressure against Dan Marino. He reads very quickly, and he'll expose you with his release and his accuracy if you play a high percentage of man coverage. More effective for the Patriots were combination coverages. On this play, which is 3rd and 4, you again see Miami in a 4-wide receiver set. This time, it's trips right. O.J. McDuffie is the receiver closest to Dan on the inside. The Patriots match up with Ty Law, Chris Canty, and Larry Wiggum, along with safety Lawyer Malloy over the top. But watch what happens at the snap of the ball. Wiggum works across McDuffie's face to the outside. You see him there. Linebacker Ted Johnson, who lined up on the other side of the formation, comes across to double the first inside receiver. The Patriots have 4 defenders to cover 3 receivers, and the coverage combinations change according to releases and routes. Dan loses Wiggum in traffic, sees Johnson coming from the weak side, and throws the ball to the outside of McDuffie, away from the middle. The result is that Wiggum is in perfect position for the interception and the touchdown.
All 3 of the interceptions that Dan threw in that game came against combination coverages. Now, I can speak from experience. As a quarterback, combination coverages are difficult to read. They cause you some problems, and that's certainly the case for the wide receivers. Tommy, I think that although New England's going to have to mix up their coverages tonight, it's going to be very important that they use combination coverages, especially in those passing situations.
Well, Mark, what Pete Carroll has done is taken great advantage of the talent left to him by Bill Parcells. You think about Lawyer Malloy and Ty Law and Willie Clay, and even in the linebacking core, Teddy Johnson and Brewski, they can all run. And that allows you to do the kind of things that we saw in the playbook, where you have a linebacker run from one side of the football field to the other to disguise the coverage. You can't do that with people who aren't very athletic. If they'll do those same things tonight, I think they have a chance at least to make the same kind of plays against Dan Marino.
Mark called those coverages combination. It looked like a junk defense having Ted Johnson run that far. Whatever happened to the draw play to show pass and then hit that quick hitter up the gut where Ted Johnson was just standing? The one thing the Dolphins need to do is run the football so they stay out of situations that dictate down and distance where you get the junk defenses that Mark Malone just showed you. If they can do that, the play action pass comes into where you have 5 to 10 yard area when you are not running the football. When you have that play action pass game running with a serious commitment to the run, that yardage goes from 10 to 20 yards to throw the ball inside, and you make Ted Johnson cover people instead of running to a spot.
One of the newspaper clips from this week says, Miami offense ranked 29th, but Lawrence Phillips may get significant playing time.
That should help tremendously because he's going to break 1 or 2.
But if you don't run the ball and you don't stop the run well,
you're exactly right.
Going home.
I'm going to the Super. I got my ticket going to the Super Bowl.
You did this last week.
I mean,
coming up, Jimmy Johnson is back in the playoffs for the first time since the Dallas days. What does it all mean? Does he have the guy running next to him that he wants to take to the playoffs? We'll talk about it after. Simple plan. Every day there's a playoff game. There's a countdown and a prime time. Saturday, 11:30 a.m. Eastern. Sunday at noon. I'll be in the big chair Saturday at 11:30 with you guys because Boomer is with the other Boomer. Boomer Esiason, the ABC pregame at noon. Then Mike Patrick and Joe Theismann have the Vikings and the Giants at 12:30 Eastern, followed by Al Frank and Dan bringing you Broncos Jaguars Act 2 at Mile High. And then after the games are done, every day there's a playoff game. There's NFL primetime. Complete highlights, analysis, and reaction, 7:30 Eastern this week, Saturday and Sunday on ESPN. The New York Spotlight and Bill Parcells contributed. The Barry Sanders 2000 quest made yesterday's Jets line an unforgettable day. If you didn't hear, Brown had neck surgery today, is in stable condition as he recovers. He does have motor functions and feeling returned. Mitch Albom was there in Detroit, saw it all happen, and shares his thoughts in tonight's Prime Monday Minute.
So often in the NFL, players act superior. They say outsiders wouldn't understand. And most of the time, this is ego talking. But on Sunday, it was something else. In the fourth quarter of the Lions-Jets game, Detroit linebacker Reggie Brown collided with an opponent and was knocked unconscious. His eyes rolled back, his lips turned blue. Players began screaming that he wasn't breathing. Medics cut open Brown's pads. They stuck an IV in his arm and a breathing device in his mouth. It took 20 minutes before Brown could be loaded into the ambulance. As the vehicle pulled off the field, fans applauded hopefully. Meanwhile, players from both teams, Jets and Lions, formed two huddles. They dropped their heads, leaned on one another, and prayed. Some of them were crying. At that moment, the fraternity football players speak of was indeed unique, bound by the fear that Brown's teammate Robert Porcher would later whisper. Every time you run on the field, he said, you never know if you'll be running off. If you want to know what separates NFL players from those who watch, it's not money or fame. It's that chilling notion that any play could be your last. And it gave us a strange and tender moment Sunday when players trying to conquer each other were instead united in prayer. Mike?
Thanks, Mitch. On a much less serious topic, the Miami Dolphins can win a division title tonight. Jimmy Johnson can get back in the NFL playoffs for the first time since 1993. But why do I get the feeling Jimmy and Dan Marino are still more Oscar and Felix than Montana and Walsh? Throughout South Florida, folks are wondering whether we're seeing the final days of Marino as a Dolphin. Why? Because elsewhere on the team, you can't help but notice the youth movement. 34 players on the current roster have never even been in a playoff game. Oh, and another reason. The Dolphins rank second in passing, but 29th in rushing. That's Don Coryell, not Jimmy Johnson. Like any 36-year-old athlete, Marino can't be brilliant all the time anymore. Sometimes he plays like the Hall of Famer he will be. Sometimes, though, he can't lead a scoring drive on the Colts. That's not going to be enough for Johnson. And that's why what happens tonight and in next week's playoff game against the Patriots will go a long way toward determining not only the direction of the franchise, but strange as it may sound, for the man who these last 15 years has been the franchise. Mike?
And Mike, let's bring in ABC's Lynn Swan from Pro Players Stadium. Swanee, how do you approach tonight's game if you're the head coach? Do you hold something back knowing that you're going to see them on Sunday? Or do you throw even more stuff out there and make it tougher for them to prepare for Sunday's game?
Open the floodgates. Just let it fall over the edge. Everything you have, win the ball game. Jimmy Johnson wants to win the game because he's got an advantage being here. Dan Marino does not want to go to New England on a cold, potentially snowy afternoon and have to play this football team. They'd rather stay home. New England, of course, can't hold back anything. They have a tremendous home field advantage if they win the ball game. The key here is win the game, get your opponent on your home turf, and then next week, it's not about whether you've shown them something or not shown them anything. It's a matter of execution and playing the best football you can.
During your travels for the year, you've seen most of the teams that are in the postseason. Give me your thoughts on both playoff pictures, starting with the AFC.
Well, I think when you look at the AFC, you have to look at, I think, the Pittsburgh Steelers and Kansas City. Kansas City is not a team everyone expected to be dominant in the AFC West. They thought Denver would be. Denver's right behind them, but they've got that wild card road to bear, and they've got Jacksonville back at home. I think the reason why you pick Kansas City and Pittsburgh teams to play for that spot in the Super Bowl is because both teams are playing their best football right now. And, of course, Bill Cowher had a chance to see San Francisco and what happened with Jerry Rice, so he held out his players to make sure they got the extra rest. We're talking about Jerome Bettis, of course, to make sure they're ready. On the NFC side, there we go, I'll get it out someday. I think you look at Green Bay. I think Green Bay is just playing the best football right now. I think San Francisco is going to be tough. I think they're actually better right now playing without Jerry Rice because they're spreading the ball out more. You realize that they're throwing fewer passes this year in San Francisco, about 40 fewer, and they've got about the same yardage and more touchdown passes to the other receivers than they had when Jerry was there last year. So they're much more balanced offense, especially if they can get Garrison Hurst back and playing like he did to get the 1,000 yards. So you look at San Francisco and you look at Green Bay, those are the two teams that will play for the right to be in the Super Bowl.
Amazingly, first time in the Super Bowl era, the Niners didn't have a receiver who had a 100-yard receiving game. Lynn, thanks to all the Monday Night Football crew for their help. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, too.
Coming up next, backstage, the young guns of the Dolphin D, Jason Taylor and Derek Rogers. Talk with Leslie, and will they toot their own horn?
Backstage is brought to you by Intel, makers of the amazing Pentium 2 processor.
25 of the Dolphins' 53-man roster, first or second-year players, including Zach Thomas. Let's go back to Leslie.
Mike, there are two play better in the playoffs. Their run defense has not been strong, and their pass rush hasn't dominated either. Jason Taylor told me he's going to take it as a personal challenge tonight to battle tackle Bruce Armstrong, but he said he doesn't think that trash talking is going to work against an 11-year veteran who's headed for the Pro Bowl. Mike?
Probably not. Armstrong, the steadying influence on that Patriots offense. Great story, Leslie. Thank you. And back to you in a bit. Speaking of the Patriots offense, there is Drew Bledsoe. And if you hear people in New England talk all the time, they say, Drew Bledsoe has not won the big game. I think that's being a little tough on him. But he does have some things to prove in your mind, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's trying to prove them on every throw, Mike, and that's what you can't do. When you talk to players and coaches, they say stand next to the deepest guy because he's going to throw you one that will shock you. You just have to catch it like Eugene Robinson did. The one thing Drew has to do is let the guys do the work for you. Any pressure that you put on yourself should come from yourself, not allow the outside influence. The most important thing is you know the reads, and I don't know if Larry Kennan is doing everything he can as the offensive coordinator to help Drew Bledsoe relieve that pressure and be the best quarterback he can be.
Key for any quarterback is concentration, and certainly at times Drew seems to lose focus, and whether it's a series of plays or two series of plays, sometimes it costs the New England Patriots football games. And then I think that any quarterback, any big money quarterback, not necessarily talking about Drew Bledsoe, you have to be answerable to someone. He used to be answerable to Bill Parcells. You're making a mistake on the field, I need you to correct it. However strongly you have to say that as a coach, you ought to be able to say it. And I don't know that all coaches feel they can say that to those multi-million-dollar stars on their teams.
He's answerable to his players, though, because they're starting to say a few words about like the throw he had last week at Pittsburgh.
Everyone says that locker room after the game and that key interception in the loss to Pittsburgh was a very heated and emotional locker room. It didn't come out in the press, but everybody did say it was heated in there. Ahead distant replay goes back to the era of the shared quarterbacks in Miami before Marino and after Greasy. We'll show you who led the team. And next, Chris Berman. He shows us some other Monday night finales when the last game of the season had postseason implications, and one of them was Pats and Fins back in 1986.
You know, any time that you can go and get a hit on a guy, boom, pop him, and knock him up in the air where his cleats come out of the ground, they call that a decleater.
They're going to tear you out!
That's my game. What's yours?
Here we are at the World's Do-It-Yourself Finals. Larry Snyder's up in the routing compulsories. This man's making a name for himself today. Very smooth. But can Larry and his trusty reel be tooled handle the 4x4? He takes it deep. Out of here. This kid's coming in unranked.
That's why there's a new kind of Speed Stick. Speed Stick Ultimate. It can't miss because it's antibacterial. New Ultimate kills the germs that cause odor. Works like a charm. So even if your dancing stinks, you won't. When it counts, go Antibac. New Speed Stick Ultimate. Kills odor, protects guys.
There's good sound, the sound of the crowd. Most sounds are good, but there's some ugly sounds. And probably some ugly smells.
That's my game. What's yours?
Just 27 catches and 2 touchdowns this year for Terry Glenn. Says he's 85% with his hamstring injury. For more on tonight's game, to New York and Chris Berman. Boomer.
All right, Michael, thank you, and a Merry Christmas to everybody up there from our extended family down here at ABC in New York. For the 4th time since they started the 16-game schedule back in 1978, the Dolphins and the Patriots are playing the final Monday night game of the year. And a couple of these, certainly Patriot fans will definitely remember. The first one, 1978, was a day that will live in infamy in New England. Chuck Fairbanks, who built a moribund franchise into a very good young team, told his team during the morning that he would be accepting the University of Colorado coaching job. Now, he told the owner, Billy Sullivan, he'd like to stay on through the playoffs, but Sullivan would have none of it. They had a screaming match in the locker room. He ordered Fairbanks out, and Ron Earhart and Hank Buller were co-coaches for this game. The Patriots appeared disorganized, and you could certainly understand why, although 3 times in this game at the Orange Bowl, they moved inside the 10-yard line, but didn't score in any of those possessions. Miami beat the Patriots 23-3, an economical passing game as usual by Bob Greasy, 12 of 13 throwing, including a touchdown to Nat Moore. But both teams were moving on to the playoffs anyway. Ironically, both, the next week Miami played Houston. Houston won. The week after that, Earl Campbell, the rookie and company, came up to New England, and Houston won again. Both teams knocked out by the Oilers. The game that really sticks in your mind is 1986, because the Patriots, in what would be the last regular season game ever played at the Orange Bowl, had to win, or else the Jets would win the AFC East, and the Patriots would be out of the playoffs. Tony Eason started the game for New England and found his team trailing Dan Marino and company. Marino with 3 touchdown passes, 2 to Mark Clayton, 1 to Bruce Hardy. Eason knocked out. Steve Grogan came in. He ran for a touchdown and down 27-20 in the fourth quarter, hit Tony Collins with a 12-yard pass, tying the game at 27 all. Then, with under a minute to go, he found his favorite receiver, the Steamer, Stanley Morgan, for a 30-yard bomb, and the Patriots had beaten the Dolphins 34-27. Patriots won the East, moved on to the playoffs. The Dolphins did not make the playoffs at all. So again, in the final Monday night game of the year, it's the Patriots and the Dolphins with feeling, just to determine, Mike, whether they wear shorts next week or whether they wear ski parkas. Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays. Coming up next, distant replay to the days of Don Strock and David Woodley, the combo that has taken Miami to as many Super Bowls as Dan Marino. It's a great story. You're going to want to see.
We had the unscheduled one when the World Series forced an extra Monday night game, but Dan Marino makes his 31st start on Monday Night Football tonight. He's 18-12, taking on the Patriots this evening. Oh, before Marino and after the great Bob Greasy, it took 2 quarterbacks, one the cerebral type, who eventually became Marino's mentor, the other a free spirit who may have felt comfortable at the event that gave us the duo's nickname. The event was Woodstock. The nickname was Woodstock. The quarterbacks in what some call the greatest playoff game of the last quarter century they were. Miami's 2-headed QB. Excuse us while we look back for tonight's distant replay.
Woodstock, an innovative blend of talent and personalities from across the musical spectrum, performing on a field in front of thousands. Woodstock, an innovative blend of talented quarterbacks with strikingly different personalities in front of thousands on a football field. Woodstock, David Woodley, and Don Strock became Bob Greasy's co-replacements in 1980, as Coach Don Shula implemented a dual quarterback system to complement his stellar defense. Shula opted to start Woodley rather than Strock because of his limitless athletic ability.
Shula put in some plays for Woodley that you could never use for another quarterback. There was a halfback pass where Tony Nathan would throw the ball back to Woodley, and he scored in several plays. So he was an athlete trying to learn how to play quarterback. And the way that the Woodstock thing came up was when we fell behind early and you needed to throw the football, Woodley, although he had the strongest arm any quarterback I ever played with, including Marino, he didn't know how to use the arm. He was still learning how to. That's when Strock became a viable option.
Strock was a classic drop-back passer, a cool customer who relieved in nearly half the games over 2 seasons, often snatching victory from the jaws of defeat.
He was a master of reading defenses pre-snap, and he knew the entire offense, and he'd be liable to check to anything. So I think we were more confident as a team with Don in there.
Defense had to prepare for 2 different game plans when they played the Miami Dolphins at that time. You'd prepare for the run, the option, and sprint out passes, and bootlegs, and things like that when you were playing against the Woodley. And if those things weren't working out, then I was put into the game, and we went back to a drop back, straight play action type thing.
The ultimate display of Woodstock in action came in the 1981 playoffs, when Woodley and the Dolphins fell behind 24-0 to San Diego. Although ultimately losing in overtime, Strock rallied the Dolphins in one of the greatest games ever played. And just as they differed on the field, so too did these two differ off it.
I guess you would just say we're just different people. You know, I was maybe a little more outgoing and enjoyed the banter with people outside the game. And once he left practice, I'm not really sure what he did.
Okay, Jack, I'm roll.
What are you doing from the Woodstock situation? Well, I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to get into that.
David was an interesting individual from a personality standpoint. He was a little bit aloof. I don't know that anybody really knew David very well.
David was probably struggling with himself, maybe trying to find out who David Woodley was.
Woodley's introverted style never allowed him to develop a closeness with his teammates, even with Strock, the man in position to become his mentor.
A lot of times he wasn't real receptive to a lot of things that happened, wanted to do it his own way.
He was a talented youngster, had all the physical tools, and probably should have been done a better job of preparing.
Woodley was the starter, Strock the reliever, and both were dissatisfied with their part-time roles.
I know that Strock felt that he should have been the starter. Woodley felt that he should have been playing the whole ball game, but you know, when you point to the scoreboard and say that, well, we're in the Super Bowl, things have worked out pretty well.
Shula's juggling act was successful on the field, taking Miami all the way to Super Bowl 17. David Woodley's long completion to Jimmy Cephalo for a first-quarter touchdown was the only highlight for the Miami offense with Woodley at the helm.
I think Don Shula made an error of not going Don Strock earlier. David Woodley completed 4 passes at Super Bowl 17. That's hard to do.
I think what probably kept me out of the game, you know, from coming in and maybe even starting the second half was the fact that Fulton Walker returned the kickoff. You know, that really kind of put us up. I think it was 17-14 or something at halftime, and I guess we had some illusions of that we were really kicking their butt, but you know, we really weren't. You know, and players knew it in the locker room.
The Redskins eventually prevailed, sending the Dolphins a message. They needed one strong individual at quarterback to lead the team.
When you look into a guy's eyes and you really don't know what he's all about because he's kind of a closed-off personality, it's difficult to follow that guy.
That guy proved to be Dan Marino, Miami's first-round draft pick the following year, who forged the partnership with Strock, which Woodley had squandered.
And Dan, rather than rejecting the advice and knowledge from Don Strock, utilized it.
When you give credit to bringing Marino along, that credit needs to go to Don Strock. I mean, he's the guy that became Dan Marino's mentor.
Woodley was traded to Pittsburgh, where he ironically shared time with Mark Malone for 2 seasons before vanishing from the game. Strock stayed on with Miami for years as Marino's tutor, helping to mold history's most prolific passer.
I went from playing behind one Hall of Famer to playing behind another one. But I have no regrets, and you know, you always say everybody has their 15 minutes of glory, you know, somewhere along the line. I had a few more minutes than that, maybe 17 or 18.
Distant Replay is brought to you by Chrysler, engineered to be great cars.
Who'll ever forget the hook and ladder? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's been the leading touchdown getter in the National Football League this year. They face the Pats in a little bit.
Is brought to you by AT&T. It's all within your reach.
David Meggett, 12 yards shy of 1,500 total yards this year. One final check at the stadium, and here's Leslie.
Mike, it's very loud and very exciting here. They're lighting off fireworks as we speak. Well, you just mentioned Dave Meggett. Zach Thomas told me that Meggett is more of a problem for him than Curtis Martin. He said Meggett's quick, short steps, he said, really kill me. Well, one man who is in the house tonight, and it is rocking, who the Patriots might want to consult, is Dave Lundstedt. He's here as a guest of Jimmy Johnson. His Bears were the only team to beat the Dolphins here this year. Mike.
And Leslie, they did it on that Monday night we talked about. Thank you very much. See you after Sports Center, or on the Sports Center that comes after the game. The New England offense has struggled over the last 2 games without Curtis Martin. They'll be missing him again tonight if you missed that story earlier. A paltry 90
to get the linebacker Harris. Everything else remains the same. And you'll see again that the center Wallaball does a nice job pulling to cut Thomas in the hole. Another first down run for Martin. Let's look at yet another example later in the game. Same Patriots formation. Defensively, Miami's ends are wide again. But the offensive line recognizes that the middle linebacker Thomas and the weak side linebacker Dwight Hollier are cheated up. That's a blitz read. So instead of pulling, the center Wallaball makes a zone call with the left guard Lane. Wallaball will block the tackle while Lane will get Thomas, who's attacking, not flowing laterally. Another gasher for Martin. Look at the size of that hole. You just don't see that very often. To me that the running game must be a defining element in the Patriots offense tonight.
Now, this was by far the best running play for the Patriots when they played Miami. It gives you the opportunity to hit.
As O.J. McDuffie and the Dolphins get ready for the game with the Pats, the winner wins the East.
There's a new leader.
Game's over. Come on over for SportsCenter. Linda Cohen and Gary Miller tonight. Stories they'll be following, some NBA storylines, Mets trade, and all the NFL news from this day. Final thought, Mr. Jackson.
Well, when Jimmy Johnson and the Dolphins run the ball 25 times or more, they're 9-1. When they don't, 0-5.
I was going to use that.
Yeah, right.
But I think for the Miami Dolphins, their safeties are going to have to play big because they have played horribly the last 2 to 3 weeks. Jimmy Johnson's been looking for a combination that works. If the safeties can stay at home and make plays, Drew Bledsoe won't get those 2 touchdown passes, may get 3 interceptions from him.
Oh, this should be an interesting game. Remember, the winner will be the host for next week's playoff game. There are a lot of people who you don't see behind the camera. They work upstairs in the control room. They make this 90 minutes fun every week. And we thank them so much for their help, and we thank you for watching. The Tour of World Gymnastics Champions is up next from Charlotte. If you're going over to ABC, enjoy the Dolphins and the Patriots. Merry Christmas.
Buffalo Bills returned to the Super Bowl, but did not come close to matching their near-victorious effort in Tampa. As for Bill Parcells, well, he retired in May of 1991, only to re-emerge with the New England Patriots in 1993. Now, only Don Shula has ever led 2 different franchises to a Super Bowl, so Parcells certainly has his work cut out for him. But whatever he does or doesn't accomplish in New England, he will always have the legacy of winning what was the greatest Super Bowl of all time, a game that was played the way all Super Bowls should be played.
Hi, I'm Steve Sable. Super Bowl 26 presented a dream matchup between the 2 best teams in professional football. The Buffalo Bills had come within inches of winning a world championship in Super Bowl 25, and many thought that this game would mark their coronation as kings of the NFL. But in the Washington Redskins, they faced a team that was as bright as they were brutish, a team that sought their 3rd Lombardi trophy in 10 years.
Before every battle, there are battle cries. Before every war, there is a war of words. And before Super Bowl 26 ever began, there was sound and fury that, alas, signified nothing.
1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. We're going to pump it up, baby. We're going to make history today. This is surreal. We got no game tomorrow, Steve. What's up with that? Who we playing tomorrow? Nobody. This is it. This is it. Show them something they've never seen. All I got to say.
Big talk has never won the Super Bowl. World champions need steel nerves and steely eyes, a steady hand and a firm grip. Some teams measure up to the size of the challenge, while others seem dwarfed by the enormity of the prize. Despite the clash of styles, there was little argument that the Washington Redskins and the Buffalo Bills were the 2 best teams in pro football. the flamboyant Bills pranced onto pro football's largest stage like the Funky Bunch. While those old smoothies, the Redskins, glided into the Metrodome doing that old soft shoe.
Yes! Here we go!
Two vastly different teams vied for a championship. Only one could win.
Where else would you rather be than right here, right now? We're world champions. Let's go. Keep the mask. Do it for Mike. Do it for yourselves. Do it for everyone. 1, 2, 3.
In the first quarter, the Redskins marched downfield behind the hands and legs of number 81, Art Monk.